I'm Tom Hilton, and I'm here at the Pottstown Regional Public Library. And we're going to be talking about a Greek family in Pottstown. John Tellis, who was a Greek sailor, came to Pottstown right after the Second World War and started a painting business, bought a house at King and Adams Street, and brought up 3 children here in Pottstown, 2 girls and a boy. They all went to Pottstown schools. They all went to Kutztown University. 2 came back as teachers and taught their entire careers in the Pottstown School District. And the boy, the youngest, took over Pottstown Community Television. So we'll be talking to Popi Tellis Prothero about her experiences growing up in Pottstown. So I'm here with Popi Tellis Prothero, who is a member of a Greek family. Her parents came over to the United States after the Second World War, and she grew up in Pottstown, went to Pottstown schools with her sister and brother, went to elementary school and couldn't even speak English at that time. All 3 members of the family, Popi, you and your sister Angie and your brother Gus, all went to Kutztown.
Yes, that's
all
correct.
Came back to Pottstown. You still own the house that your father bought about 1948 on King Street.
That's true. Mm-hmm.
And you and your sister both became Pottstown teachers.
Yes.
For more than 30 years, both of you, until you retired.
That's true.
And
yes.
Your brother Gus, Constantine John, your brother Gus, has been running PCTV for many years, having gone into that right out of Kutztown.
Correct.
So let's talk about how your father got from, I think he was a sailor?
He had originally come, he had an uncle who was a lobster fisherman up in Massachusetts. And he originally came over he was a merchant marine, left and worked for his uncle. And then he knew some people who lived in this area, in South Pottstown, and he decided to come and see if he could get a job here. And so he came here and he became a painter. I think he was an apprentice painter and then became a painter on his own. And I still marvel at that he had broken English. He was able to get a truck and get the equipment and, be able to, get business on his own, and it grew and he became quite okay. And he was able to decide that he was ready to get married. So he went back to Greece, met my mother, and they came with me in their tummy, and I was born here in Pottstown at the hospital down the road on 422 when it was called Pottstown Hospital. Now it's, it was North and South Hospital, right? And
so your father and mother were both from the same island?
An island called Chios, yes.
And why don't you tell us, because it's interesting to me looking at a map, it looks like it's practically in Turkey.
It is. You can see Turkey from the coastline, and it takes maybe 10 minutes if you would take a rowboat to go to Turkey. The relations have not been wonderful between Greece and Turkey, as the world knows, but I think, for instance, coffee used to be called Turkish coffee by the Greeks. Now it's no longer allowed to be Turkish coffee. It's Greek coffee. And we're fighting about baklava's origin and things like that. But it is very close, and there are many Greeks who live in Turkey. So.
But there aren't any Turks on Chios, or are there?
Well, I think they might keep it on the down low if they are. I don't know. So I did, not learn English until I went to school. My father spoke broken English, my mother no English, and she also had a hearing issue, which delayed being able to learn it. So when I went to first grade, they decided to put me in a class that was a first grade class, even though I was 5. I didn't understand anything. The teacher tried to be verbal, and I got a terrible report card, the worst of my life, because I couldn't do anything. But I did get an A in art, because I was able to do music and art, because those were things. And I still, to this day, remember, she held up a picture that I drew to the class, and it made me feel connected to them for the first time. Because everything else I wasn't able to do. By the end of the school year, I think I could read and I could, do the math because that was easier. So that they had to make a decision about what to do with me for second grade. They didn't want to keep me back. I think they thought that I was probably able to move enough ahead to be on a second grade level by the end, which I think for that time period was pretty great. What they did is they split a class up and took the children who were not quite ready for second grade, divided us up. We were in a class that was mixed, second and first grade, which back then, that's pretty innovative, I think. And then as I became more, able to understand more, I got moved up to the second grade reading level in that side of the class, and that was like a big deal, promotion from one side of the class to the other. And then by third grade, I was fine. I was in a top reading group, so Blue
So
Jays or
you picked it
whatever.
up in a hurry. So for those people, of whom there would be many, who don't remember where your elementary school was,
Sure.
why don't you talk about that elementary school a little bit?
Okay. I went to Jefferson Elementary School, and I remember back then we all walked home for lunch. All our schools were within walking distance, so we would walk home for lunch. I'd go down the hill, buy Schultz's Bakery, and smell that bread, and it would make us all very hungry till we got home. And then we would go back to school. And I was trying to remember if my father would come and get me, and I'm thinking he must have come to get me because I was little and probably, even though it was short distance. At the time, he would leave work and take a break, I think, to take care of us. He was very, very much that way, very hands-on kind of dad. I remember my first grade teacher was Mrs. Suplee. Her husband was a teacher at the high school, and one of the wings at the high school, I think, has his name on it. There's on the corner. I noticed that when I was teaching there. Then second grade, I had Miss Silver, and then she got married, which was a big deal. And her name was Miss Duttenhofer, and she was a great teacher. Third grade, Mrs. Burden. Fourth grade, Mrs. Measley, who I was terrified of when I was next door in Mrs. Burden's room, and we'd hear her yelling, and I'd be so scared that I'd get her. And she turned out to be one of my favorite teachers. So, Then I was there last night trying to think, what happened in fifth grade? I couldn't remember my fifth grade teacher. And I remembered my sixth grade teacher, Mrs. Anderson. She was great. She had a Volkswagen, the things you remember about your teachers. And then I thought, oh, duh, I went to Greece in fifth grade. And that was a big deal. My mom and dad wanted to go back. Their parents were getting elderly. They wanted to go back and visit. So I went with my dad to see the superintendent, Mr. Fosnock. And I remember I had to do a lot of the talking because my dad's English was still broken. And he agreed that if the principal of the school that we attended signed a release that we had attended school on a regular basis, that we would not lose our year. So we both did fifth grade in Greece. And that was quite an experience, I'll tell you.
So let's bring up you after when you were in second grade,
Yes.
then your sister was in first grade.
She was in kindergarten.
She was in kindergarten when you were in second grade?
Yeah. I don't quite understand that either. We were not 1 year apart, we were 2 years apart always in school. And I don't know, I don't know why that is. And I ended up being one of the youngest kids to graduate, in my class because of the way they started me early instead of putting me in kindergarten. I'm not quite sure. Kindergarten probably would have been a better fit. Maybe it didn't even exist. I'm not quite sure when the kindergarten programs were established here in Pottstown. But she was in kindergarten when I was in second grade.
So your sister Angie, you walked to school with her once you were both there, or
Once
did
we
you
were
try
both
and
there.
ditch each other?
No, well, she had a half day, so I had a full day.
Okay.
So my dad probably was the one taking her back and forth, She had morning kindergarten, I remember that, yeah. Trying to think, she had some same teachers. We didn't have the same teachers. We had different teachers for most of them. I think one or two of them were the same, and that was a big deal to have the same teacher,
And there was a bit of time before Gus came along. He's
10 years.
10 years.
Yeah.
So you were out. You were out of Jefferson by the time.
Oh, when Gus, I was
came
out of
along.
school, I guess, right? But when he was born, I'm pretty sure. Where was I when he was born? I remember taking care of him, so I guess I was in high school when he was born. Yeah.
So then after Jefferson, you went to a school that's no longer around.
Yes. I went to that school close to your home, I think. Across from the cemetery there, on Chestnut Street, right? Is that?
Yep.
And I was there for, I began at the junior high. I began at the junior high on, which street is that? Franklin. I started there, but then we were such a large class. I understand we were one of the largest classes that ever went through. They split us up based on where we lived, and I had to leave some of my very good friends and go to a different school for 1 year. And then we were all back together again at the high school.
So for people who wouldn't know, and most people wouldn't know,
Yeah.
so there was a high school at one time that was built on Chestnut Street
Yes,
at Penn.
yes. It was a nice building. I liked that building.
I like that building too.
Yeah.
And then when they built the new high school, which is now the one they use in Washington, that old high school became Central Junior High. And so they were split up, and some kids went to Central,
Yeah.
as you did for 1 year, and the others went to Northern.
Correct.
And then when the school district lost population in the 70s, Central was considered to be an excess building.
Right. I
And the two
assume.
churches bought it, and they tore it down, regrettably, for parking.
Yes.
But now you're at Northern Junior High School. And now you're in with kids from all over Pottstown.
Yeah. I wanted to talk about my time in Greek school because I think that's quite a contrast to what.
Please do, I'm sorry.
There was quite excitement about the little American girls. They would chase after us, and like we were stars or something on the playground. Everybody wanted to talk to us because they wanted us to talk English to them. English is a subject, of course, that they all started taking even in elementary school. It went all the way through. So when they decided that they would send me to the high school once a week to speak to the English class, a teacher, and that was a very strange thing for a fifth grader to be standing in front of a group of high school kids telling them how to talk. But the teacher would say this to them, and then I would say in English something, and then they have to say it back, and I had to say whether they did a good job or not. It was a different experience for a child that's only in fifth grade. But I found another experience that wasn't so great, is our math at that time was not up to their math, and I couldn't be in fifth grade math. I had to go to fourth grade math because I had not seen the things they were working on. I can't remember exactly, but it was fractions, and I hadn't had that level of fractions that they were working on. So I don't know if that's still the case, if we're keeping up with what's being taught, but I know it made an impression on me that I wasn't on the right level in math, and I had to go down a level. Otherwise, we were fine. I mean, we were able to handle the reading. The teacher assigned us special reading so that we could, keep up with what we needed to be doing. And then he would sign our papers for us. We had a male teacher. Both of us were in the same class, which was odd because she was 2 years behind me. But they put us together so that they could, I guess, do like tutoring for us, And that was quite an experience because we would go to church with the whole school would go to church once a week. We would all walk down to the church because it was all connected. And that was unique and new to us. But the whole experience was something both of us really never forgot. It was great to be at a different country to go to school at that young age. So then when we came back, we were able to be in the grade we were supposed to be in, sixth grade for me, and fourth grade for her. So it worked out, Now, what else would you like to know about? How about my community that I grew up in? I grew up with a Polish family next door, and across the alley, an Italian family. Across the people who were Pennsylvania Dutch. Then there were Irish, and the neighborhood was so diverse. Yet we all knew each other.
So let me locate it for a minute.
Yeah,
So
sure.
this was at King and Adams Street. So you're just down the foot of the hill where the Hill School starts.
Right, exactly.
And you're a block away from High Street. Okay, I'm sorry.
That's fine. Across the street from us, the Mr. O'Donnell, who is a lawyer, he's deceased now, but I think his firm still has the name. And then there was a man named Mr. Wiley and his wife, who became quite attached to my dad. And he was such an interesting man. He was a retired oil man. And he and his wife drove this European car that fascinated us. I had never seen a car like that. Was a convertible. It was a very unique. They were very interesting people. And he would come and visit, and he would usually have some story to tell us that we would all sit around and listen to everything he had to say because he was such a fascinating man. So that was an interesting neighborhood. That was a whole different neighborhood from the kind that I grew up with. 3 doors down, Mr. and Mrs. Biggs were a sweet little couple. They didn't have indoor plumbing, but they were just a most wonderful little, tidy little Pennsylvania Dutch couple. And they had a Packer car that they drove to church only once a week. So I don't know, when they passed away, there must have been hardly any miles on that car. So those kinds of things stick in your mind too. There was a corner store, Amels, which is now a barber shop, and we all would go there and get penny candy. And you could get, for a dime, you could get a whole little brown bag full. And then you could get cold cuts, and if you didn't have the money, she had a blackboard, and there would be little pieces of paper with how much each family owed. It was such a unique experience, you know. What else did I want to mention? I wanted to write down the things that I thought were amazing. I remember the coal trucks coming. We didn't have coal, but I remember I was fascinated because we had a neighbor who had a coal bin, and the coal truck would come and put the coal down in the basement to heat the house. The other thing was phones. We didn't have a party line, but a lot of our friends did, and then we'd make long distance calls where you had to talk and say, I'd like to make a long distance call, and you had to wait and they'd call you back. And then, you know, those kinds of experiences are like so unique now, considering what a cell phone has done to our world, right?
And calling Greece must have been extremely expensive.
Extremely, extremely expensive. But mail was snail mail, as they call it now. Airmail letters would come. My mother would act like, you know, Christmas every day when she'd get a letter. We'd see one of those airmail letters that had the little red stripes around the outside of the envelope. Yeah. We kept a lot of my mother's letters that she got from Greece because it was fascinating to look at the writing. Yeah.
I think she got a Greek newspaper, didn't she?
Yes, she did. Yes, she did. It was, and she'd tell me about news that was like 2 weeks old, like it just happened, and I'd say, yeah, I heard about that. Yeah, it was fascinating. Yeah. Let's see. Oh, it was very important to have a routine, I thought, and I thought that when I taught also, that children really like a routine in the morning. It makes them feel like safe and grounded, especially little ones. But I remembered that the teacher would hold a Bible in her hands, and read us a verse from the Bible. And I didn't really understand it because I didn't understand English, but it was calming that she would read something, not very lengthy, and then we'd salute the flag. And it was all done every day at the same time, and it was routine that really helped us. And then I was starting to wonder when we stopped reading when they stopped doing it, and I couldn't remember. But I think it was still going on when I was in middle school. I'm pretty sure they were still doing it, but I don't recall it happening in high school, so maybe that's when it stopped.
So how did you decide to become a teacher?
I really wanted to go to college and become something. I didn't know. I thought I wanted to be, I was always good at art, so I wanted really to go to art school. But my father and mother said there was no way that I was going to be anything but a secretary. I could be a secretary, or they wouldn't even let me be a teacher. They wanted me to be a secretary. So they insisted that I get into the secretarial. There's a special class that was called the secretarial class that you had only 30 girls could be in it. You had to take a test. So I got in this 30 group, and they promised us that we would get a job when we got out, guaranteed. Well, I was there maybe 2 months, and I hated it. So I went to see the guidance counselor, who was my friend to this day. I visit her in the nursing home still. She's 96. And I told her my parents didn't want me to go to school, but I really wanted to go to college. And she looked at my grades, and she said, I think you could go to college. But I said, I'm in this program, If I leave, that desk stays vacant for the whole time. And she thought it was more important for me to do something that I wanted to do. So she talked to my parents, to my dad, and I got to go into the college prep class. So I got to go to college. And I became a teacher mainly because of her and how much she influenced me. So that was part of it.
And was your sister influenced by you?
I sort of, I was the one who, because I went through certain steps that my parents didn't, had to fight for being able to go to a football game and that kind of thing. She got to do those things without, having to go through all the little, hoops and I had to go through. Yes, I'd say yes. She became a teacher because I think she wanted to be a teacher as much as I did. And we both liked art, so, I think she might have wanted to be an artist too, but she became a teacher and she was a damn good one, so,
And you immediately went back to Pottstown after Kutztown to teach? You didn't apply anywhere else?
I was in a program. I had taken so many courses that I was able to only go to school. I'm trying to remember now. I only had to go to school on Tuesdays and Thursdays, so I commuted from home, and I could sub. So I subbed Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, and I was subbing for Tony Zampella at Jefferson, and he said there's going to be an opening here in special ed, and I was dually certified at the time because I was a student taught at Rupert first grade, so I could have decided to do that like Angie did. But he said, it'll be an opening, do you want it? And I said, well, yeah. So that's how I got my job. The next year I was at Jefferson, where my sister was also teaching. So we started out in the same school, but she wasn't teaching yet. You know what I mean? She ended up coming while I was there.
Were you both at Jefferson at the same time?
Yes.
Really? For how many years?
Not very long. I got transferred then to Edgewood, which I spent a lot of time at Edgewood. Mr. Lemon Stevenson was our principal. He didn't know us apart. He had difficulty keeping us apart.
Really? I don't think you look the same.
No, but the name. So he would send me messages that belonged to her, and I would get messages that, vice versa. But it was interesting having two Miss Tellises at the time because I wasn't married then, in the same building. And we don't look alike. The kids didn't notice that right away, that we don't look alike. Yeah.
So, and you're still living at home where you grew up?
Mm-mm. No, my daughter is living in that house.
When
I was teaching.
First teaching, you were still
when I
living
was
at
teaching,
home.
yes. I did move out. I did move out my second year. I think I was living on Charlotte Street. Judy Green was living on the other side of me. That's where we first, I met. She showed me this apartment. She was a reading specialist at the school, so I was living on, I guess, Charlotte Street for a little bit, and then I moved to Reading, Flying Hills.
That's when you got married.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So how did you get from elementary to high school?
I kept getting moved around based on whatever the conditions were with the special needs children. When I was teaching at Jefferson, I had a group of children that were ages 14 to 7. It was a mix. They didn't have enough classes at the time. And then they started to separate them based on their needs. We were a how to put it, there were a lot of children in there who had different needs that really one classroom couldn't handle. There were learning disabled children, there were children who were much, much more needy, and we were all together. And then it slowly, as they got more teachers were able to teach the specific needs of the children, and that's the way it's done now. But back in the beginning, back then, special ed classes were pretty lumped together. If you had a problem, a learning problem, you were put in a class, and it was hard to handle all the different needs of the children. And there were no aides then. I had no aide, and I had all these kids. So you really need an aide when you have special needs children, which is what I ended up doing. So I taught at Edgewood for approximately maybe, I think, 10 years. I was at Franklin for maybe 3 years. I was at the middle school for about maybe 10 years. And then I ended up at the high school finishing my career there. So I got a smattering of everything, you know.
And meanwhile, your younger sister, Angie,
Yes,
taught first grade at Jefferson for years and years and years until it closed.
correct.
And
yes.
then she went to Franklin.
Yes.
And those are the only two schools she ever
Right,
taught
right,
at
right. And
Jefferson.
you'll find that the regular education teachers pretty much stayed in the buildings they were in. But the special teachers, we didn't have a choice. We were sent to different, you know, it wasn't my choice. Although I enjoyed it, every school I was in, I enjoyed the children and the teachers there. They were all wonderful. I must say, I made a lot of wonderful friends.
So when you got married, you moved out of Pottstown, commuted in. Meanwhile, your younger sister, she lived at home till the day she died.
Yes, she did.
So she was at Jefferson and Franklin, and she really didn't live too long after she retired.
No, that is sad. Yes, she did teach while she was ill for a little bit, but yeah.
So, but the house is still in the family.
Yes.
And you were saying, so after you got married, you had 3 children.
Yes, yes, I did. Yeah, I had 3 children. They all went to college. I must say, I was the first one in my family to ever go to school, to ever go to college, and it was great that my father, as a person, I don't think he went past 4th grade. To have 3 children graduate from college was quite a special thing for him. All 3 of my daughters went to school. Olivia went to University of Delaware, and Emily went to Pottstown. So we have 4 generations that have gone to Pottstown, and Millicent went to Temple, and they are all doing really well in their jobs. They have very good jobs, and they're doing very well.
And Olivia's the one who still lives in the house?
No, my youngest, Millicent, does.
Oh.
Millicent. Olivia lives in Oxford, Pennsylvania.
Okay, so Millicent still lives at 623.
Yes, and she works from home. She works for a wonderful organization called Best Buddies, and she's their national representative for fellowship development, where she goes and recruits and does workshops to get college students and high school students to work with special needs children and become their buddy. And it's a Kennedy organization, nonprofit, started by not the one who's running for president, but his cousin.
So let's talk about your youngest sibling.
Okay, the one that's taping us right now,
The one that's on the other side of the camera, but
Yeah.
why don't you talk about him?
Yeah, well, he was an interesting little thing to have this little 10-year-old, have a 10-year-old brother, and he always had some trouble with school, but he was very smart. So he had a learning issue that wasn't discovered, and that's why at first they put him in a special needs class, and he didn't belong in there, and they soon discovered that. So he had some really wonderful teachers who were able to see how he learned and help him learn. So that was really good for him. And then they found that he could play tennis pretty well, and that became his real mantra. Right now he's coaching tennis and has been coaching tennis at Pottsgrove for years. And he had a mentor at Pottstown High School that really helped him, Mr. Grant, Keith Grant.
And so he went through Pottstown High School and graduated and went to Pottstown. So
Yes.
all 3 of you went to Pottstown.
Yes, he went for television communications, yeah, at
But
Pottstown.
he was not an education major.
No, he wasn't. Nope. No, he wasn't an education major.
He majored in,
Telecommunications.
and then he started working for Mark Pollock.
Mark Pollock, and they were situated at Pottstown High School. So that was also interesting. I'm teaching there, and my brother's downstairs, in the studio there. So that was interesting. He did some nice work with my kids. I would always have a field trip where I take them, and he would show them how the television works, and he was very good. He could have been a teacher. He was very good at pointing out how things went and how they work. And kids are fascinated with television, so at the time.
So you and your brother know a lot of people in Pottstown
We do.
because you've been here so long.
We do, yeah, we do. Pottstown has gone through some changes, but I'm on the committee for my 60th high school reunion, which is coming up next year. And we discussed at the last reunion, a lot of them, how they all loved growing up here. They all have fond memories of going downtown and going to the stores downtown, and nobody locked their door and sitting on the stoop, and everyone's memories seem to be similar. They remember so many positive things about Pottstown. So Pottstown used to be, and I think is trying very hard to be, the small town community it used to be, that sense of community that it had back when I was growing up. I remember all the stores. My brother does too. You know, the 5 and dimes, the 3 5 and dimes, the department store, Block's furniture store. I guess Betty Lee was one of the dress stores, and then there was I've forgotten the name of the shoe store. The shoe stores. It was very fascinating. It was a very nice little town. We would walk downtown every Friday. Everyone would go downtown, and you'd see people you knew. That's where all the mingling would happen. Are we about? Is there anything else that we should discuss? Let's see. Oh, Greek school. Yeah. My parents wanted to make sure that we retained our knowledge of Greek. There was a lady living in South Pottstown.
Let me jump in here. You
Sure.
spoke Greek at home?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
Yeah, and I still speak Greek. You know, not as much, and I miss having someone to talk it to because I always would converse with my mother, and I miss that, being able to speak. You know, but I have relatives in Philadelphia, so we do talk on the phone, and so I do get to speak it. And I call Greece every once in a while. There's a couple relatives there who I'm still in touch with, so, and who are very, very anxious to have us come back and visit and stay with them. So it's nice to know there's a place to go if I ever do break out of this place. Anyway, you wanted to know about Greek school. Oh yeah, this lady taught us. We had little books, and we'd practice once a week. We did that for about 3 years, and then we gave up on it.
Where was it?
She did it out of her home in South Pottstown. I don't remember the address, but one of those homes that's when you come, the tunnel, that tunnel that, you know what I mean, the overpass, right near the overpass. I remember it was one of those homes. It was on her porch. I hated it, I must admit, so did my sister. We couldn't wait to stop going, but we consistently went for 3 years.
Were there any other Greeks in Pottstown in
There
school?
was a small, not in the school. There was a small contingent of people. 3 restaurants were owned by Greek people. The Schuler House, George's restaurant, which was my godfather, and there was another one up the street. The Crystal, right. And then, of course, there was a hot dog place that was on Charlotte, in the corner of Charlotte where the railroad tracks are. The hot dog stand there. We remember him. I can't remember his name though. Leon, that was his name. Was there any other? So those were people who knew each other, and you know, we would go down to my godfather's restaurant, go in the back, and he would peel potatoes and talk to us as he was peeling his French fries. And so it was an interesting life, it really was. The Schuler House was really well known, and when it closed, a lot of people were upset because it was a very nice place to eat. The Greek people did not attend church here. The closest church was in Reading, where we also went. And at the beginning, we went to, when I was younger, the church was on 8th and Court, and it was upstairs. I remember thinking, it's strange to go to a church upstairs. But they were able to get enough money, and they built a beautiful church that is now right across from the high schools. What's the name of the high school?
Central Catholic.
Central Catholic. It's a beautiful church that people go to tour it because it's so gorgeous inside, St. Helena and Constantine.